welcome back to the Djellab channel, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, of course, Henry Hill is here, but we are back together. My Football Mundial brother, he is back.
Baby.
Welcome to the channel, Mikey. Michael McCubbin.
Yes.
Oh, it was Doogie last week. It's beautiful, man.
It's like London buses, isn't it? Like,
Exactly.
You wait bumps for one to come around and then two come at once.
How are you doing, McCubbin? I actually think this is our first video, definitely all three of us together, since probably
months and months.
8 months, 9 months.
Yeah, crazy. I mean, the first video that came to mind when you said all of us together actually was the video that never went out on Football Daily just before COVID hit. Do you remember Henry's first ever appearance on the channel?
Oh, the quiz.
The quiz that never saw the light of day.
But then that did eventually become what the monthly quiz we did twice.
It did.
Yeah,
it did.
yeah.
Immobile, yeah.
Immobile.
Did that clip ever actually make it onto?
That is the only bit that made it on socials.
Yeah.
A lot of
what a time to be alive.
Definitely, and a lot has changed since then. But how are you doing, mate?
But very good, very good. Honoured to be on the Djellab channel
Mate,
at long last.
Thank you very much.
So looking forward to it.
Pleasure is all mine. Now, as you guys can see by the title of this video, and it's international break, we're gonna.
Oh, I'm well.
How are you doing, Henry? How are you doing, Hennessy?
Henry, you're just part of the furniture here, aren't you?
I was going to say I'm absolutely delighted. I'm in such a good mood. I don't think we three have been together that much on camera ever, really.
Yeah,
this is great.
Actually,
that was the thing. I was trying to rack my brains
True.
as to when the last video
And the great thing about this is my second week with Djellab on screen, and you can see the other work that we've done in the comments, in the description below, where Zach did my quiz this week. And wow, what an episode. What a rush. Thank you so much for watching that. Go watch that now.
What a rush. If you guys have missed my quizzing ability, which I'm sure you guys have, then yes, that's linked down below. I'm sure Henry will comment as well from the account. But now let's get into the video, because yes, obviously it is the international break, but we don't really want to talk about England. Like, half the players don't care about it. They're pulling out, giving themselves the week off, which is fair enough. I do believe that the September international break should not be a thing, which would also mean the October one would matter more. Anyway, different issue, different issue. As you see by the title of the video, we're going to look back at what the first month of the Premier League has taught us. So I put a tweet out asking you guys at home, what have you learned from the first month? Good, bad, positive, negative? Have you been shocked? Has there been an improvement? And you guys came back and gave me a lot of comments. So without further ado, we're going to go get into them and talk a little bit about the first month of the Premier League. And why not start with Manchester City? This one came from Connor Holden, who obviously has been on the show, the channel before. Fantastic guy. Thank you, mate, for watching and commenting. And he said, Haaland is a joke. I think we might as well get this one out of the way. Yeah. 2 hat-tricks in 3 games. I think he's on 7 goals, isn't he? He got the goal in another goal in this other one. He's not too bad. He's not too bad, is he?
I actually think Joe Hart did some good analysis of him on
Joe Hart's
Match of the Day.
Actually really good pundit.
Just showing the intricacies of his first touch and how it opens up space, and how the goalie is almost in no man's land, because Haaland's shot power and accuracy is so lethal that really the goalie's got a 50-50 gamble, and even if he goes that way, there's no likelihood that he's going to make that save. Like, even that second goal he scored at the weekend against West Ham, just smashing it above Areola as well. It's just that for me. I mean, I liked all the finishes. And the difference is, you see other strikers. Let's take Kai Havertz. I'm not trying to run Kai Havertz under the bus here. Kai Havertz gets through against Brighton at 1-1, and he has that chance. Good save by the keeper. But it's in those instances that we take it, City fans maybe take for granted, or maybe they don't, I don't know, but like, Haaland just finishes. He just finishes every time. He just hits that corner. It's a cheat code at the moment. Is he the most technically wonderful footballer of all time? Probably not. But, oh my goodness, if you give him a yard in the box, he will take that opportunity. And what I liked earlier about the game against West Ham is he missed that header. And you're looking at that header, you're thinking, he should be burying that. And you do see him miss the odd chances, but you can see he's constantly thinking, constantly working away in his head about how to change and how to sort of, what he's going to do the next time that he's through on goal. And it's just insane. So I think centre-backs more than ever are going to be frightened of him, because he's playing, I think his first touch, the other little intricacies to his game seems to have got better. And I think it has to be said, if you just give a player a good break over the summer, if you give them a chance to rest, if you give them a chance to like get that energy and love for football back, because we all get burnout in the workplace. We really do. And that does apply to footballers. If you just run them ragged throughout the summer, making them play here, making them play there, all these competitions, they're not going to just arrive at the pre-season fresh. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he said it himself. He had time off. He went away. He worked on a few things. He enjoyed himself. And he's come back and he's hungrier than ever. And yeah, it's frightening to watch.
It does make me think, if Norway continue to underperform on the international stage, whether that will see Haaland's career be prolonged, because he's 24 now. Like, I haven't done the calculations in my head, but like if he stays at Man City for a significant amount of time and remains fit, then I have no doubt in my mind he will like obliterate Alan Shearer's Premier League record.
There's something about he has to stay in the Premier. If he continues at the same rate, he has to stay in the Premier League. I think for another 5-6 seasons.
That's it.
And he does it. And so he'll be that'll be before his 30th birthday.
I will say, if Norway can't figure out a way to get the best out of an Odegaard, Sorloth, Haaland trio, then it's a disgrace.
Oscar Bob as well.
Oscar Bob. If you consider the amount of teams that have qualified for national tournaments with less, if they can't figure out a way to get this golden quadruple, I mean, there's even a few other good players in that Norway squad.
There is.
Like, that is enough to be a problem in a group like Wales and Gareth Bale. Come on, Norway.
How they don't make the Euros is pretty mad. But like you talk about that with Haaland, I think it's his variation of finishing as well, which is such an asset to his game. And I think he is a bit underrated actually as an all-round footballer. I don't think he'd be in this Man City team if he wasn't able to link up play. Like I think he's absolutely fine at that. It's just the other elements of his game. He's so much further ahead than any other centre forward in the world, really. You look back at like the last 2 years, and the only real superstar striker who's been on the market for big money has been Victor Osimhen, and he's now at Galatasaray. And you can't really name any other strikers. I know Julian Alvarez went for big money this summer from Manchester City, but that was because City felt they didn't need him because they have Haaland. Like, he's so much further ahead of the competition in that regards. Like you talk about the Havertz chance, like thinking about the Nicholas Jackson chance against Crystal Palace at the end of that game on the weekend, and that was perfectly fine. Like a striker at the end of the game, like he even said afterwards, he was pretty tired by that point.
With a defender on his back as well.
On his back as well. It was like, that's
closing down.
Perfectly reasonable chance to not score. Like, but you would bet 8 times out of 10 that Haaland would absolutely put that away.
Yeah. I think that's what's crazy. Like, I think you mentioned it there, Henry, about especially compared to, and Mikey, about like compared to other strikers. It seems like right now there is, whereas maybe about 10 years ago, elite finishers that would put away their chances felt like there actually were quite a few all over the place. Whereas now, it does feel like there are a lot of strikers out there who do need, say, 5 chances and they'll get 1 goal, maybe 2. Whereas with Haaland, it feels like you give him 5 chances, he gets 4.
Yeah.
And when he plays for Man City, like, he's just got chance after chance after chance after chance.
It does come in waves though. Like
it
this
does.
time
Right.
last year, he was actually really struggling on the finishing front. I mean, he still finished as the Prem top scorer despite like missing how many games did he miss in the end? It was almost 2 months in the end. Like he still finished as the top scorer, but like last year he did look a little bit more mortal.
Yeah.
But I think that we'll see that throughout Haaland's career, especially if they have fitness issues. Like it will come in waves, but when he's on it, like there's no one in my lifetime who's been on it like that.
Again, I think it feeds into him having time off and getting his body perfect. Because he was struggling last season. And you're so right about Osimhen. They're probably two, stylistically, that's the only one I can think matches up to Haaland. And what I mean by that is just the pure drive to get the ball, to get past the defender, to beat off anyone around you. It is Drogba-esque. It's like peak Drogba, but with finishing on another level, quite frankly. And the problem with Osimhen is that energy and drive has led to some injuries over time, almost over-aggression, and we've seen that a little bit with Haaland. The only question about City is if Haaland's injured, and we've seen that they sold Alvarez without really replacing anyone. Oscar Bob's now injured. Yeah. The only question for City is if Haaland is missing, and he can't play every minute and every second. I'm not saying they don't have the personnel to accommodate for that, because they do. They've got multiple ways of scoring goals. But if Haaland is injured, that's when we'll really see what this City team is all about, because that is, as I think Pat rightly pointed out, where they're slightly light in their squad is an attack. However, look, if you can get a buffer zone on the rest of the competition with Haaland right now, then it's going to be they're going to be a serious problem once again. So yeah, it's really fun to watch him. Actually, I think he's great, and he seems like a pretty funny guy as well.
No, he does have good character and good personality. that makes a lot of sense. I think City were looking at some like 19-year-old kid, weren't they, as like a possible kind of backup to have.
Furuhashi.
The one from Celtic. But I think they also looked at some like super youngster guy. I don't think they made the move in the end. But there we have it. That's Haaland and Manchester City. Let's move on a little bit about West Ham. This one comes from Morgan Turner Green. And they've said, Aaron Wan-Bissaka and Kilman are surprisingly incredible at football. We still have a striker problem. I know it's early days of Fulkrig, and Lopetegui seems like a good manager at the moment, contrary to what I believed before he was appointed. I thought like Lopetegui, I don't know, maybe it was just a different viewpoint, but I feel like Lopetegui actually, when he left Wolves, he left with quite a lot of credit in the bank in the Premier League. I thought a lot of people were like, Wolves are going to really struggle with him. And in the end, obviously O'Neill's gone on to do a good job. We'll see what happens for the rest of the season with them. But I think maybe that might have just been Morgan's belief. I'm trying to think like everyone else. I think thought he was a good manager.
I think with Lopetegui is the fact that we have seen him throughout his career have a lot of success with quite fairly defensive 4-4-2 pragmatic football, and West Ham fans, I think understandably had enough of it last year with David Moyes. I know they finished in a perfectly respectable position last year, but the style of play was really bad. Like their actual performances, like when you look at underlying numbers, when you look at the amount of territory they were giving up, when you look at the amount of like expected goals they were conceding and stuff like that, West Ham were right down there. I think there were the relegated clubs. In terms of like who were conceding the most chances and the highest quality chances last year, and then it was West Ham, or West Ham was among them. Yeah. Weirdly, then it was Man United. That's how bad Man United's defence was last year. But I feel like for West Ham fans, it was a bit like where we're getting, we're kind of getting the Spanish Moyes in essentially. So I do understand that, but equally, I think, even if you're going to have, a pragmatic manager in charge, someone who's not, fully committed to playing front foot attacking football all the time, I think still having that refresher, especially with a big summer of spending as well, I think in the long run will be positive for West Ham.
I think it's a really good transition from David Moyes because it's not a mental leap like they've tried to take in the past. And we're talking about a guy here who's managed Sevilla successfully, Spain successfully. Was the manager of Real Madrid?
Not successfully.
Not successfully, but I mean within that, what I like is I think Sevilla is maybe the kind of level that West Ham, like peak Sevilla, is kind of where they want to be. That kind of underdog that can. Oh, I mean, look, Sevilla, for all their troubles now, have
consistently in Europe.
For all their troubles now, have won an unbelievable amount of trophies in the last decade. But when you're a successful manager of a national team, you're learning to deal with the parts that you've got available to you. You're learning to try and get the best out of your squad. And bear in mind, his Spain team was in that interim between the great one and what we're seeing now, a youthful generation. It was a difficult time, but he did okay. He just obviously screwed it up with that whole Real Madrid's business. My point being that I think if West Ham want that wild leap to wild attacking football, they're not going to get that with him. He's wise enough and smart enough and has managed long enough to know what he has at his disposal and how he needs to set up his team for games against certain... Because against City, they were okay. They just got undone by some great finishing. And that's my point. Like, I think they've got the versatility under Lopetegui now to utilise the Kudus. I think Kudus is unbelievable.
Yeah,
like,
ridiculous.
Utilise their good attacking talent against the weaker teams and maybe try and blow them away, but also be wise enough to know against the good teams, no, we can't necessarily go gun-ho, which is why I like the Guido or something in midfield. The fact that, as we pointed out, Wan-Bissaka, Kilman, Todibo, really, really solid, excellent defenders. They will be able to shut up shop a little bit against the good guys. What they've now got throughout that squad is an attacking and defensive team that they can roll out in different phases and different moments. And I think that makes them very, very dangerous.
I think it kind of goes hand in hand, doesn't it? Wan-Bissaka, you don't sign Aaron Wan-Bissaka if you're planning to be like a 65% possession team, do you? But he has been brilliant on the counter attack. Like he's a good player. In the right system, he is really good. And even at United, we saw him contribute to counter attacks effectively, even if he wasn't a passer out of the back. But that's what you have Kilman for. I think Kilman in particular has been
against Palace.
Brilliant.
That goal
oh my god,
was incredible.
So good at playing out the back.
Because I think the fee was 40 in the end. Like the
40.
fee was
not insignificant.
It was a big outlay to put on someone. However, for a left-footed centre back who can be a good distributor,
Kilman.
Kilman. It's not the end of the world. Like, yeah, it is a lot of money to spend, I think.
I think an 8 million.
And I think it is
5 million over.
exactly. Yeah, and I think Wolves fans, like there were a few Wolves fans that said actually we're more than happy to take that kind of fee and run with it. Whether they're going to then put it back in the squad, we'll see. But I think West Ham as well. Like, I know they are lower down on the table, but we're 3 games in and they've played Man City, which obviously they lost to, and they weren't actually that bad in. That's Erling Haaland for you. They played Crystal Palace, who they beat 2-0, and it was actually a very, very strong performance. And they played Aston Villa, which they conceded late into the game to John Duran, who obviously seems to be finding the back of the net every 90th minute or so, and does feel like he could be something special there. And they weren't too bad in that game either. Like, I think generally West Ham fans right now, I know obviously they've only won 1 game so far out of 3, but it does seem not too bad. And that is kind of what Morgan is saying here, that they've been maybe a slight surprise. They beat Bournemouth as well in the Cup, in the Carabao.
Going away to Palace and just winning 2-0, that is, for me, more interesting than the other 2 games that we've seen, because that's a problem for the other teams. Because teams will be dropping points around them. If they can go and comfortably roll over the teams they're expected to beat this season, that's going to be huge.
Well, they're direct rivals, aren't they? Palace and West Ham, really. Like they're both vying for like a 10th or 9th place finish. So I think that's is that a mad thing to say? I don't think.
I feel like West Ham, given their recent European pedigree, would expect a little bit more than that. It's not crazy.
But the top 8 is just so hard to break into now, isn't it? Like, if you want to go for the top 8, then you do need to. It's be beating Aston Villa. You need Newcastle or Villa or Tottenham or United to drop out of there. Like, it is. I feel like the Premier League is a top 8 league now. It's a big 8 rather than a big 6. And like you say, Brighton have gone off like a rocket as well. So I think it's so competitive. Like the mid table is so competitive.
Yes. So West Ham, not too bad there, Morgan, not too bad. Let's talk about what Alex Gray has suggested here. And they said, the second I believe Everton are improving and can somewhat be stable, they remind me that we're a laughing stock of the league. Bless him. I mean, you know what? I think in our predictions, I'm not too sure what you did, McCubbin, but me and Henry, we sat here on the camera with Pat and said, and we all kind of said in agreement, we think Everton might have a good season this year. Like, it might be the year where they're a little bit more stable, touching on just like trying to fight for 10th place or so, as in going up higher on the table, not in a relegation battle. And obviously, so far they are currently sitting rock bottom in 20th place with 3 losses, 10 goals conceded, and 2 scored. However, I would like to shed a little bit of light, because they've played Brighton, Spurs, and Bournemouth now. The Brighton game, I think they lost 4-0 in. I actually don't think
Spurs game.
Spurs game.
Brighton
was 3-0.
3-0, sorry. I actually don't think. I think they were a little bit unlucky. I've definitely felt like in the first half of that game they could have scored a couple of goals. They were super unlucky with how things went for them. Brighton won't go get a goal, and it kind of changes from that side. Tottenham, they were poor. Super poor. But there is also like Pickford's error. If Pickford doesn't have that error and it goes 2-0 so quickly, maybe things are a little bit more different. And then Bournemouth, they're 2-0 up until the 87th minute. Like, is that just a freak accident, or is it just Everton are that bad?
Do you not think that that's a slightly worrying sign, though, that like after a decent first half against Brighton they collapse, after a very decent 85 minutes against Bournemouth they collapse? Like, I agree. You can't sustain like yourself in the Premier League like that. I guess my caveat with Everton's current form is that they are terrible at starting the season. I think they've only won 1 game in August since 2021, which is pretty crazy. Damning, I think Rafa Benitez was in charge at that point, which is, that feels like a long time ago, doesn't it?
Was Rafa post-Carlo?
He was post-Carlo.
He was post-Carlo,
yeah.
Cool.
And I guess Rafa Benitez taking charge of Everton was kind of the beginning of the rot that we've seen at Everton. I know it's a lot more deep-seated in terms of, it's since Mashiri took over in 2016, all that spending and how they've been hamstrung in the market by PSR since then. And obviously, like the takeover, the potential takeover, that they really need to happen this year.
Textor.
Textor is he is the great hope.
Yeah.
The last of many great hopes.
Yeah.
I will say this though.
777 or whatever.
Yeah, I will say this. I mean, 777. I think, given their track record at other clubs, it's probably good that didn't happen. Textor, I think, he does seem like a safer pair of hands if you look at his involvement with Leon.
He put the whole squad up for sale this January again. I mean, this
I know,
summer.
yeah, not really. But at least I think there seems to be a plan with Leon at least, and I do. It does feel like Leon are going to improve over the next few years. I think. I don't know. Maybe if you have a different opinion on that, but either way, he at least seems like he's got his heart in the right place. Nevertheless, that needs to happen with Everton.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I just think the squad is good enough and the manager is good enough to keep them up. Like there are still there are already signs there with Eregbanan, I think has had a good start to the season. I think Oral Mangala from Lyon, of course, on loan. I think he's a really good addition to that midfield. I think he was a massive loss to Nottingham Forest last year when he left. I know they've shored up that midfield since, but I think he's just a very, very tidy midfielder. And then kind of up top, Calvert-Lewin took a great goal against Bournemouth on the weekend. Dwight McNeil started in quite a good creative fashion. Iliman Ndiaye has looked quite bright, especially against Bournemouth. There are signs there. I think the defence is a bit of a worry with that right back,
which is actually what was one of their best assets last season. The defence was so good,
and I think Jared Branthwaite's of course yet to come in. We've got O'Brien yet to play a minute yet. He's still sitting on the bench. So I think there's reasons to believe that Everton are going to improve, but it is a bit worrying when you're collapsing in games this early in the season.
Yeah.
They did lose both their first 3 games last season, as well, as you mentioned, similar records the way they've started the years, but they have got in the next 5 games in the Premier League, Villa, Leicester, Palace, Newcastle, Ipswich.
I just think
there are winnable games in there. There are winnable games in there.
There are, but they're also everyone will be looking at Everton as a winnable game right now.
Yeah, very true.
And I think Jake O'Brien was so good at Lyon when they were on the ropes last year. I think you need that kind of character and energy in the team. He really became a Lyon cult figure because when they were all being shouted at by the fans, he was one of the players that really stood up almost out of nowhere and said, right, we are going to get better. So he's great. Get him in. The problem is they're having
that's what happened to Everton as well, the fans.
Lindstrom and Ndiaye, these are 2 players that have just come off bad seasons after bad moves. There's a lot of pressure on them to just suddenly step up in a very toxic cauldron. And I was at the Spurs game, Spurs-Everton game. The atmosphere from the fans is not good either. I feel like the fans have
Did you see the video of them getting back on the train?
Yeah, the fans have stuck by Everton the last few years because I think they appreciate it's not the team. But when the players aren't stepping up to the plate, that's when I think there's going to be a real problem. I don't want to see Everton go down. I think Everton are important for the Premier League. I want to see them playing in that new stadium in the Premier League. But something has to give. But I agree with you, Mikey. I think Sean Dyche is not the problem there.
No, definitely not. I mean, it's also worried that Sean Dyche was calling out the fans as well after that opening day defeat to Brighton. A lot of fans were leaving the stadium, and that's where maybe things could come unstuck a little bit if the relationship gets severed between the manager and the fans. Last season, I was listening to an Everton podcast recently about how, they were talking about how last season really the team got galvanised when Sean Dyche started saying it's us against the world, we've been wronged, and that's when Goodison comes to life. At the moment it feels like Goodison is dying a little bit. Obviously they're moving out of Goodison at the end of the year as well, but there is an anxiety, isn't there? They're moving to Bramley Moor Dock next year. This is going to be one of the nicest stadiums in Europe, an amazing location on the Liverpool waterfront. If they can make a success of that, then that is going to be the positive legacy that Moshiri has left the club. I don't think there's any denying that in terms of a great stadium that represents the history of Everton and all that, but the anxiety around them potentially having to play there in the Championship is obviously really, really rife, and it could go one or two ways. But my gut feeling is there are still definitely 3 worse teams than this Everton side in the league, and that will just about be enough to keep them up.
Well, we've still got a lot of games left in the league. We'll see what happens for Everton. Let's move on to Chelsea. This one comes from Fard Ahmed, and they have said, for Chelsea, I'd say Madueke has kick-started his season quicker than I expected. Obviously, just got a call up to the England squad. Maresca is more versatile than I thought. Cole Fofana centre-back pairing is gelling together faster than I had thought. Another quick person from Chelsea also mentioned Chelsea are still dealing with youthful consistency issues, I feel. So Chelsea, so far they've played Manchester City, lost 2-0 in the end. They have played Wolves, won 6-2. And then they played Crystal Palace on the weekend and drew 1-1. How do we feel about Maresca's start to life?
I think there's been such a media pile-on, and I'm not going to deny I was probably part of that as well. But
someone who definitely was, who's not here right now.
I'm not actually. Take away the noise of the ridiculous transfer window, the ridiculous policy. Take all that away and actually just look at the football. I don't think it's that bad, actually. I think it's all right. Losing 2-0 to City and losing your minds is just so ridiculous. I was at that game, and you were playing okay against a very good City team. You probably could have scored a few, but you got into the box a lot and then sort of dilly-dallied around. The point is, yes, I do agree. I am sceptical. I still think it's ridiculous sacking Poch for Maresca. I still think, for me, that just doesn't make sense at that moment in time to have done that, and then to completely turn over a team that was heading in the right direction last year. But
I mean, it was a mutual agreement, wasn't it?
I do think this one was a lot more on
Poch, but to sever that relationship.
To sort of hit the reset on what he'd done in a year, I think slightly odd. I will say, and it's tricky because this pile-on, you felt that in the Servette game at home, where suddenly fans are booing it. I mean, they were crap against Servette, don't get me wrong, but suddenly fans like booing the players at half-time, and you're sort of thinking, hold on a second, look through the noise. This is going okay. You've got people like Nkunku, you've got him fit. Madueke is really stepping up. I think João Felix has shown some really bright spots coming off the bench. You should have beaten Palace. I think Palace played well.
Should have got a red card, Palace, as well.
Palace played well for about half an hour and scored a goal from a very gifted player. My point is, Chelsea are okay. They've got enough firepower going forward. I don't understand Pat's opinion on Pedro Neto. I think Pedro Neto is very good.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't remember who he was saying he was saying he loves like a direct wing on one side. I'm like, well, that's what Neto does. Like he is. And I don't think 50 million, whatever it was, is a big overpay for.
60, I think it was.
60 or something. It's fine.
So I think it's potentially an overpay given his fitness record.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's the only thing I'd say is that he
doesn't have to play every week for Chelsea because they've got so many bloody wingers.
Yeah, but then you could have just you could have used that money elsewhere in the squad, right? Like that. I love Pedro Neto, and I think he is a 60 million pound player when fit, but it's just like I think when it comes he has to remain fit.
When it comes to money in Chelsea, I try and not look at the transfer fee. I try and just focus on the players.
It's a bit easier.
And they've had their hotel signed off as well. So it's all right. So it's actually once again money is no object.
He's done it again, my friend.
Honestly, it's like bloody Monopoly.
He's done it again.
I would say that.
Madueke, you mentioned him there, Mike Henry, but Mikey, he has just been called up to England, had a very good game, obviously, against Wolves. He seems to have maybe unlocked a new level. Like you mentioned injury issues, obviously, there with Pedro Neto. I think one of the first things what happened when did he join? January, I think, not last January, January before. So he's been here for now a year and a half. One of the big talking points was his injury issues that he had in the Netherlands. He constantly was getting injured and long-term injuries. And actually, since he's been at Chelsea, things have been all right. Things have been okay. But it does feel like maybe this season, towards the end of last season, he was turning things on as well. This season, it seems like he's carried on that form. He's got a great partnership with Cole Palmer. As I said, been called up to the England squad under Lee Carsley. Lee Carsley knows him well from the youth teams. He was someone actually during the window, it felt like he could possibly have left Chelsea, and then he scored that hat-trick, and it was very much, he's off the table. How do you think Madueke?
I mean, the Wolves story is just brilliant, isn't it? I mean, that will go down in Premier League history, won't it? So that accidental post, the hat-trick, the botched apology afterwards, that is Premier League heritage. But yeah, I think he's looked really good and has looked really confident. I think it's really difficult for for forwards to come into this Chelsea, or particularly wingers to come into this Chelsea setup and immediately have an impact when there's so much competition, there's so much, whoever's in charge has so many decisions to make. It's so dependent on the manager's style as well. And particularly these days with wingers, depending on which manager you have, you're either his kind of winger or you're not. Like it does feel very stark in that sense. We've seen that with the likes of Pep. We've seen that with like Ten Hag at Man United.
Yes.
With Sancho. I know there was personal stuff there as well, but I think there was stylistic issues too, and obviously Sancho in the Chelsea setup now as well to give Madueke some potential competition.
How do you think Sancho will do? I think it'll be the left wing, no?
I don't know. But potentially. I mean, it depends what Maresca wants to do with him. I think this is what I was going to say. With Madueke, it feels like, and I didn't watch like every minute of Madueke last year, but it does feel like, given that he previously had a success in the Netherlands playing in possession-based systems at PSV, that maybe Maresca suits him more than Pochettino did. And certainly we've seen that with the game time that he's been getting and the confidence he's been playing with. I think Maresca, at the moment, it feels like that's already a win that Maresca's got under his belt, is that Madueke, Chelsea do actually have a proper right winger starting on the right wing each week. But you might be right. Maybe Sancho will go on the left instead. But I still think I'd love to see Sancho thrive on the right again, because that's where we saw him at his best for Dortmund.
Yeah.
I know, he that was probably his best football at United. Came off the left, but it was fleeting, wasn't it?
A few wingers there, I guess, that more so, with Pedro Neto, that can play both sides too. Whereas Madueke very much is more of a right, and I think Mudryk, when he does play, is more of a left winger.
Yeah. I think it's important to remember Chelsea have a lot of football this year. You've got the Club World Cup and the Conference League. If you don't win the Conference League, by the way, it's a disgrace.
Yeah.
Like, if you've seen the teams in that competition, I love it. But you're playing like someone from Armenia.
We're going to like Kazakhstan, aren't we?
Yeah, you have to win that. But yes, I just want to say one thing about Maresca. I really like the fact that he's got Lavia playing well again in moments. I like the fact that he's willing to do a midfield three, because quite clearly, Enzo Fernandez is not playing as well as he should do. Last year, there was issues with him and Caicedo next to each other, were getting played through at the moment. I like the fact Maresca's addressing that and is willing to sacrifice an attacking outlet to maybe shore up the midfield a little bit more. So maybe this is the versatility that we perhaps weren't expecting. It's actually taking an honest look at what the problems were at Chelsea last year and trying to fix those. And the only problem with that is then you've got all these attacking players. How do you then fit them all in? And given the game time they need. I like that. You've got loads of midfield options too. And I think he has to be brave enough to look at Fernandez and say, if you're not playing well enough, you're not going to get in this team, because it's almost been taken for granted so far.
How do you think he's handled himself media-wise? And like in interviews, because I think you think he's been poor.
Well, I think he's been tripped up by the media in terms of that whole kind of I'm not coaching that lot kind of thing. But I think, look, the problem is I
actually thought he's handled it quite well.
I think he's been at the centre of a media storm of sorts. Well, because his problem is because if he says anything bad, this is kind of like Ten Hag's problem. Well, that's a whole separate beast in itself. Yeah.
But we'll get on to that
if he says anything bad, people are like, well, you don't really have that much football experience behind you. You've managed in La Liga 2 and you've managed Leicester. So how can you go and say this, and this? So the problem is he has his history against him. So anytime he says anything which the media consider annoying or wrong, he just gets piled on a little bit. So I think he just needs to be a little bit more streetwise in how he answers certain questions and how he deflects from quite clearly baity questions coming his way. Because you can get rattled. Like, we've seen Ten Hag get rattled. Ten Hag says Harry Potter and everyone's like, oh, Harry Potter, blah, 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 blah. So my point is, Chelsea just need to get a few wins under their belt. They need to just float under the radar, winning 2-0, 2-1, whatever. They need to just look shore up at the back, and they'll be fine. But in principle, I think he's actually doing a lot better than I expected, certainly with the pre-season that he had, certainly in the transfer window. I would be quietly optimistic about Chelsea's chances this season, certainly in that race for the top 8. Okay.
I will quickly just touch upon as well, you mentioned Colwill for Fafana centre-back, pairing is gelling together quite nicely. It is, I think we've got to remember as well, Colwill towards the end of last season got an injury, missed a lot of games. Fafana didn't play a game last season. He has been out with injury for an injury over a year. Wow. So it is very good to see him kind of back and getting up to speed a lot quicker than I expected. But I do generally think, I said it before on the podcast and on other shows, that I thought Chelsea would score a lot of goals at the start and have defensive issues, and that's kind of what's happened so far. Especially when you play the football that Maresca wants to play, it is going to leave you a little bit more exposed at the back and on the counter and stuff.
I will say though that I guess to kind of caveat that way a little bit. I would say, I guess Maresca's maybe been a little bit fortunate in that he has had a fit Fofana to call upon.
Yeah.
He has had a fit Romeo Lavia to call upon as well. Yes. And I think, maybe that Chelsea midfield would have, maybe Pochettino would have just played Lavia a lot more last year had he been available, and maybe we would have seen this Chelsea midfield.
Supposedly, though, that is also down to Poch's training methods. Supposedly, according to reports.
We'll find out in the USA. We'll find out.
When
they've got an injury-prone squad themselves, to be honest.
I mean, when did Lavia actually get injured when he joined Chelsea last
year?
Lavia
it was
pretty soon, wasn't it? It was really soon.
And then he came back a few times. They got injured in training and so on and so forth.
I don't know. Maybe you could put that. Maybe you can put that on Poch. But either way, it's nice to see Lavia get the respect he deserves. Because I remember last summer when Liverpool and Chelsea were both looking at Lavia and Caicedo. Yeah. Everyone seemed to be fairly fine with Caicedo going for upwards of £90 million. And everyone was like, but why on earth are they spending 40-50 million on Lavia? It's like, he's half the price and he's probably not half the player. For a very poor Southampton team,
because he got relegated.
He looked. I think maybe it was just that he was fairly inconsistent. But whenever I saw him play for Southampton in that relegation side,
he was fantastic.
He was so good. Yeah. I remember seeing him play against Man City. Granted that the club where he learnt his trade, absolutely, he was the best midfielder in the team. The treble-winning Man City team, when I think Southampton played them either in the FA Cup or he was genuinely the best midfielder on the pitch.
Mate, he played against us and they beat us 2-1. Southampton when he was commanding that midfield. But there we go. That is Chelsea done. We'll be interested to see what the second month of Premier League football will bring for them. They've also got, in terms of the run-ins compared to other teams, Chelsea's is a little bit more fortunate for them over the next month as well. Let's move down the list then here, and let's talk about Bournemouth. Bournemouth here from John Spark, and he said for Bournemouth,
you've been wanting to speak out
for Bournemouth, even without Dom, the depth of attacking quality we've kept and added can provide the firepower to challenge for a top half finish. Underperforming XG is still an issue, but the faith in the team and the manager is very high, and the Everton comeback proves that. What do you think of Bournemouth so far? Because it does feel like they were, to be fair, even last season.
Again, they're another team that are pushing for a top half finish.
They were a team where if you were coming up against them that weekend, you weren't looking forward to it.
Well, the thing about an Iriola team, at Rayo Vallecano, he never had an amazing striker. He never had a 15-goal-a-year striker under his belt. Like Falcao was at the end of his tenure. And he wasn't even starting, really, was he? He was he'd start some, be benched some. The point I'm trying to make here is he's so good at coaching a team.
Yeah.
A team to play in a system which helps each other. And you see that. You see that when the opposition have the ball, they swarm them. You see that the movements are very calculated. He's coached an excellent side, which will therefore create opportunities for each other. He has enough players that can arrive in the box, score goals from set pieces or whatnot. That's where Bournemouth's strengths are. And even Nilsson, I like what I've seen from him so far. If they can get him up and running, I'm not saying he's going to replace Dominic Solanke, and I don't think you should expect that either, certainly this season alone. But if they can get 8-9 goals out of him,
I think he could. I think he could hit all figures for
this
sure.
is someone that was being linked to Man United.
Well, yeah, look, my point is... Yeah. He either does or he doesn't. Is that a point? I don't know.
Well, I mean, regardless, the goals are going to come from an array of attackers that they already have, right?
There's a reason that Spurs went for Solanke over Toney. It's because Solanke fitted the style of pressure and play that Postecoglou wanted a lot more, and it made a lot more sense to go for him over Toney. Are they similar goal scorers? Who knows? In terms of actual shooting ability, but so even Nilsson has a little bit to learn to fit into the Iriola system, because really that is what makes Bournemouth so good, in my opinion, is that Iriola system. Great wingers, they've got a lot of interesting attacking wingers. great wing backs, and then interesting attacking players going forwards. But yeah, Sinistera,
Semenyo started really well.
Yeah, these are all fun players, and these can all offer goals. I think it's really interesting that when they signed Hamid Traore, I was so excited by that move. From Sassuolo, and he's like I said last week, he's gone to Auxerre now.
Atara, yeah, he joined as a winger, and now he's playing that wing back.
Yeah. If they can get
in and out of the squad,
if they can get a tune out of Justin Clive as well, he looks happy there. My point is, they've got enough guys that can all chip in with a little bit to make up for the loss of Solanke, and then if they get Ivan Nilsson up to speed as well, then they're going to be a problem.
Yeah. I think people, over the summer there was lots of chat about like who's won the transfer window, chat about. Arsenal, but mainly based around the big clubs. But then when you looked at the kind of mid-table, it was like, oh, well, Brighton have done lots of really good business, haven't they? West Ham have brought in so much quality into their side. I think Bournemouth probably had as good a transfer window as anyone. Like getting that fee for Dominic Solanke and keeping hold of, front to back, their first team pretty much, like keeping hold of Zabarnyi, keeping hold of Milos Kerkez, like players who are going to build up massive value in years to come and are capable of contributing at a Europa League, if not Champions League club.
Replace the likes of Lloyd Kelly as well. They brought in the youngster from Juventus.
Recently. He hasn't played yet.
He's obviously highly rated.
The Athletic didn't rank Bournemouth's transfer window very high, which I found interesting. But it's
about keeping hold of players, though, isn't it? I feel like when with transfer windows, like it's like it often looked at the business coming in, whereas and maybe also selling, but the clubs that just don't actually lose the key components of their squad tend to get overlooked. I always think, and I know Solanke was a key component, but I just think, like you say, Henry, the system. Like the system got that out of Solanke. Like Solanke was an amazing player for Bournemouth for a number of years, and even in Iraola's first season, actually, when did he? Oh no, sorry, not in Iraola's first season. When Gary O'Neill was in charge, was also amazing. Like he was absolutely brilliant. I think he was probably Bournemouth's best player, but he didn't score many goals because the system around didn't actually. Didn't serve that. Like he was having to do so much legwork in the attack that he couldn't just focus on making those late runs into the box and getting onto the end of cutbacks. Basically what I'm saying is
Bournemouth's
I just
system
agree. I agree.
They're all right.
No, I think you're right. Sometimes I think you do end up, because obviously it's the fun of it as well, you get caught up in it, but sometimes I think you do. One of the things I feel like I learned over the years was actually not to rate a team based on their transfer window. No. And sometimes it is actually about keeping the core of the squad and just the people that added one or two players.
Look at Brentford's. None of the signings have really made much of an impact, and yet they're doing well. And that's, again, just Thomas Frank managing to get more of a tune out of some of these old dogs in the team. The Bournemouth's problem is, what is the ambition? Because we've said already how hard the top 10 is to break into. It's still going to be difficult for them. And I just wonder, at what point... I don't know. Look, it's too early to say. But it's just tricky for a team like Bournemouth. Maybe they'll get a European run at some point in the Conference League. But it's tricky.
They love that.
I know what you mean.
They'll absolutely adore that. I mean, the other thing as well, right, is if the longer Areola continues to succeed, when's the next team going to look around and go...
I don't see Areola being there in 2 years' time. I maybe don't see him being there in 1 year's time.
Yeah.
But I guess the caveat to that is that Bournemouth under the current ownership do seem to be pretty well run. I know Liverpool took Richard Hughes last year in the summer as well. So they just have to be good at replacing the key figures at the club, really.
They're almost
and maintaining a good transfer policy.
They're almost in the position Brighton were after they got rid of Houghton and brought in Potter, and things obviously started taking a real upturn. Well, maybe not as quick actually as it has for Bournemouth. Okay, nicely done.
Surely Liverpool.
That's exactly where I was going to move on to. Aidan, this comes from, and actually a few people were tweeting about Liverpool. But the main thing is that Liverpool were correct not to get rid of Diaz, despite me previously thinking he should be sold. And the other one is Slot is giving Liverpool the needed recharge. How do you think Liverpool have done so far? They've currently played, obviously, Manchester United, slapped them round the park. They're second in the table.
Brentford.
Ipswich and Brentford, indeed, beat Ipswich 2-0, which for the first half, they weren't amazing. And then Brentford 2-0 as well, which they managed that game really well. Salah looks like he's on another level, again, as always. But the one of the comments Aidan made about Diaz, actually, and Diaz has looked very, very good.
Yeah.
It's been really, really impressive, actually. I think the game against Manchester United showed that was just always in the right areas. The system and the system's not that. I think Slot himself has said it. The system's not that different to what Klopp was doing. I think that's a huge thing there. When
Certainly
you can have
against United, it was like it was. If you'd asked me like who's in the dugout right now, I'd be like, well, obviously it's Jurgen Klopp. Like,
but this is the thing.
It was a Klopp performance.
When you are having such a big change of losing someone like Jurgen Klopp, I think one they've obviously done. Look,
you can't come into that dressing room and be like, everything that you know is wrong.
It's changing.
Like,
exactly. Completely
big
different.
changes around here. I don't care who
the last guy was.
Yeah.
What did he do? He only won one Premier League.
I think one of the big difference for me is rather than having like Szoboszlai on the side of a three-man midfield, I think even just pushing the attacking players slightly further forward gives another problem for the defenders to think about. And they're winning. Obviously, they win the ball back with such ferocity that they've suddenly got all these players in attacking positions. If you look at Diaz in particular, first of all, he's just turned 27, so he's entering his peak years. I'm not going to lie, I was someone that thought maybe they could cash on him and move him out, but he is entering potentially the best years of his career.
He started his career at Liverpool on fire, and then it kind of just went a little bit more quiet, didn't it?
I was looking
that
at
injury like really knocked stuffing out of him, didn't it, in 2022?
I was looking at some of his stats earlier today, and his shot distance this season, he's taken 8 shots and scored 3 goals, which is pretty good in itself. Half of those have basically been on target. What's interesting is his shot distance is now 11.7 yards, whereas his average throughout his time at Liverpool has been 15 yards, which shows to me
that's
that
a huge leap.
It's huge in the context of being that much closer to the goal. And we've seen a lot in previous seasons. He'll like dig jag at the end of the box and shoot and miss, and not high opportunity scoring situations. Now, due to the extra effect of another midfielder in the attacking area, distracting players, due to Salah being a problem for anyone, Jota floating around as well, Diaz is suddenly finding himself in more space, and he's able to, and sure enough, he's got more sight of the goal and he's scoring more goals. But what I really like, so he's only got 1.8 XG, and we saw that second finish against United. It was a proper striker's finish, like getting around and first time into the bottom. So he's scoring like the easy goal. Look, again, early days, but he's scoring the easy chances and he's scoring like the poacher's striking chances as well. He's also, his progressive carries at like his highest ever point in a Liverpool shirt. And that just shows to me that he's feeling super confident. He's getting on the ball, he's driving at defenders, he's getting in the right positions and he's scoring goals. And that's great. That's great for Liverpool. It's quite a generous start of the season. Ipswich, a good Brentford side, don't get me wrong. And then United, maybe
the easiest.
I don't think going to Old Trafford, like no matter what form United are in, I actually don't think going to Old Trafford as a new Liverpool manager is ever easy. No new Liverpool manager has won at Old Trafford in his first game since the Second World War. So I wouldn't say, but I would say I think in some ways I don't know, like Ollie, his tactical plan just came off, didn't it, against United? Like I think
had a few chances as well.
The fact they had a 2-goal cushion by half time, I think helped with that, and especially after the second goal, Doogie was actually at Old Trafford on the weekend and was chatting to me about it, and you don't see it on the cameras, but Doogie was saying as soon as that second Diaz goal went in, every single Man United player's head dropped. Like every single player's head dropped, and apparently it was Matthijs de Ligt who was like, "Come on, guys!" Like, but it's like when you can get United in like that, and United are kind of mentally fragile like that, then I think I guess it's you have a bit of an advantage. But it is, I don't know, I guess what Slot now has, which is a real privilege for a manager, taking over from an all-time great, one of the club's greatest ever managers. Is that he now has so much money in the bank just with those 3 wins and to have won at Old Trafford that the next month, there's so little pressure on him.
Well, their next few games as well.
They haven't even conceded a goal yet. It's pretty frightening.
Their next few games, they face off against Forest, Milan, obviously in the Champions League, Bournemouth, West Ham in the Cup, Wolves, and then Bologna, Palace. They
don't have another.
Their next
really, really
big tough game is Chelsea on 20th of October.
Yeah, Milan are on
so
their
it's a long while away. Milan actually is going to.
In that time, Arsenal have to play Spurs. Arsenal have to play City, and Arsenal play each other as well. I think then Arsenal go on a run in kind of late October, early November of playing Liverpool, Chelsea, like Liverpool where they are now. I could quite easily imagine by the end of October, Liverpool and City are still neck and neck at the top of the table,
Yeah.
and Arsenal maybe even 3 or 4 points, or 4 or 5 points behind, depending on what happens in their game against City.
I think Liverpool have been super smart in that. Apparently, the reason that Salah's new contract hasn't even been discussed yet is they've spent all their summer basically making Arne Slot feel comfortable at the club. I think the way he's communicated in any interview that he's done is exceptional.
Yeah.
He's not trying to match Klopp's energy or anything like that. He's just
a lot more reserved, isn't he?
He's a lot more reserved,
Yeah.
and he's very matter of fact. He's just explaining all of his decisions very succinctly. Like, why are you taking off players at halftime? Well, for this reason, and this is what it did. Oh yeah, oh that makes a lot of sense. Do you know what I mean? He's been bold in his decision making, and it's all paid off.
Yeah.
Like Trent can't moan one bit about being subbed off at half time, in my opinion. Quansah can't moan one bit about being replaced by Konate. He's got all of his centre backs. The clearance numbers of people like Van Dijk and Konate and even Quansah on their pitch is huge. They're not. I know that he's known for his high possession, interesting football, and there's no point like almost applying a formation to him because his teams will morph in and out of different shapes throughout the game. But his defenders are doing all the right things, and also in Gravenberch, he's unlocked a whole new level in him, and this is really,
got DM.
This is huge. Like Gravenberch leads the team for tackles and interceptions. He's second for passes. He's winning the most duels as well, and also his abilities to carry the ball. It's like watching like Abu Diaby in his prime, if that makes sense. Like it's that kind of beautiful Torre as well.
Yeah.
Like pick up the ball, drive from the back. Gravenberch's 22 years old. He's had 2 tough seasons, but seriously.
This guy at Ajax was doing ridiculous things.
40 million euros, and he's solved a problem. He's gone, okay, we don't need Zubimendi. And I respect Gravenberch because he probably looked at this system and thought, wait a minute, this is what Liverpool want. This is what they're going for. I can do that. He played in a double pivot alongside Edson Alvarez at Ajax. He's a very good.
I mean, he'd go a lot more forward.
Well, he's just looked and gone, how can I get in this Liverpool side?
Yeah.
What do they need? Wait, I can do all of those things. So that's really mature, really great from a 22-year-old to step up. And this could be the answer to their problem. Because every Liverpool fan I've talked to so far is saying, Gravenberch's unbelievable. Gravenberch's great. And he is a great player. So I'm really pleased for him. I'm pleased for Slot because that in itself is a new signing, getting the best out of Gravenberch in that system. They've shored up their goalkeeper in years to come. Chiesa, I think is 10 million is an absolute bargain for someone that doesn't even just play week in, week out. Really, really positive.
No, mate, I think you're completely right. I think every Liverpool fan will agree with you that things have basically started a lot better than they might have thought of.
I think maybe people underestimated like Slot a little bit in the
Yeah,
summer.
definitely.
You know, like when you spoke to, you know, like it is a big league.
I think you know what it was. It was that comparison of people saying like, this is the closest thing I guess in recent years Liverpool have had since like when Ferguson left United, right? And someone who controlled the club essentially and had such an impact, and they were fearing like, okay, what if this becomes David Moyes levels?
But I think that's where the masterstroke of getting Michael Edwards back in has been so positive because part of the reason why Liverpool looked a little bit like they can't live without Klopp in the last 2 years was because they literally couldn't live without him because he had taken a lot more control at the club in terms of the actual running of the club. Whereas with Richard Hughes in place and with Michael Edwards, you know, kind of overseeing everything, they've now gone back to a similar situation to what Klopp walked into at Liverpool, where there was so much less pressure on the coach. And like you say, he doesn't need to be this showy kind of guy. You know, when like Klopp came to Liverpool, what was the famous quote? Like, I'm just the normal one.
The normal one, yeah.
He didn't actually. I know he is a big personality, but he didn't have to be. You know, he certainly wasn't the kind of. He hadn't become the kind of beast in media situations that he eventually became. So I think that was really, really smart from them. So yeah, I think that whole thing. I do think the contract situations are still a little bit of a worry. I do still 100%. Think that we need to probably give another 2-3 months to actually get confirmation that Gravenberch is the long-term answer at number 6 because they don't really have anyone else. Is the only thing I'd say. And at least in his previous clubs, especially at Ajax, Gravenberch did almost no defensive work. But like the early signs are really, really positive. And like, you know, if you're a Liverpool fan, I don't think you could ask for much more.
Yeah, Slot said he still needs to develop into the role, but it's a great option to have.
For 3 games in, I think Liverpool fans would be giving it an A if they had to grade it.
Maybe.
Then let's go from a club that's getting an A to a club that's at the moment probably getting an F. Manchester United.
Yes.
Erik ten Hag. I put down here as did Manchester United make the right choice? Should they have changed manager in the summer? How's it been then, Mikey? Because you're a Manchester United fan. Fulham. won the game,
Yeah.
but Fulham very much had chances.
Shouldn't have.
Then you played. Why is it escaping me? You played
Brighton.
Brighton. Lost obviously in the end, but maybe in the first half actually weren't too bad. And then Liverpool.
Yeah.
Just obviously we kind of
disaster.
spoke about it. Yeah, a bit of a disaster. How are we feeling about it? And also. Eric Ten Hag, is maybe the pressure kind of getting to him, like some things he's saying in the press conferences. I feel like he might be feeling it a bit.
Yeah, I think Ten Hag is just always under pressure, isn't he? He's been. I don't think there's really been a period of longer than 2 or 3 months since he's come into this job where he's not been massively under pressure. You know, you think back to 2 years ago when he came in and those opening day defeats to Brighton and Brentford or opening 2-week defeats, to Brighton and Brentford that were just absolute disaster classes. Yeah. You think back to last season, I think after that loss to Newcastle in the EFL Cup, and there was, the knives were really out for him at that point, and he managed to cling on, and the end of this season where there were reports after that defeat to Crystal Palace that the United hierarchy were pretty much set on replacing him, and then coming back from that with the FA Cup win. Like, I think Ten Hag's pretty used to it by now, and Ten Hag, his the way he deals with that is kind of up to him, really. That's his kind of style.
Sorry for him.
It's a difficult situation to be in, especially as someone who Ten Hag, who he does struggle a little bit with the communication side of things.
Yeah.
He does struggle with that. Like his English has never been amazing. He's never been the most charismatic speaker when it comes to the media. So I think those things all count against him, don't they? Yeah. Especially in terms of the perception of where he's at. So yeah, I do feel bad. Equally, I think it's the result of what's happened at United over the last year in terms of I just think things haven't. Over the summer things didn't quite slot into place as quickly as they should have. Or last season, Dan Ashworth, should have been at the club sooner, ideally. All these kind of things. He wasn't there when the decision was made to keep Ten Hag. Although you could say that he may well have probably would have been
Given
contacted
some input,
at some point, but you can't say for sure. And also, interestingly, with Dan Ashworth, I think the last managerial appointment that he made in his career was over 5 years ago.
Potter.
Graham Potter was the last manager he actually hired, because when he came into Newcastle, Eddie Howe was still there and doing well, to be fair. When he's come into the United job, Ten Hag's there and has been given that new contract. So I think in terms of the summer, if I ran Man United, look,
even things like the Agate deal, right? Like they knew they wanted a DM.
Yeah.
They looked at Agate from day one of the transfer window. It took till the last day for it to happen.
But I think that's good. I think that's positive.
Good.
I think it's really good. I think in the past United would have panicked and either spent 30 million more on Agate. Like that would have been in 2019, 2020. Agate would have gone to United for 80 million, like 100%. Or they would have panicked and gone for a Sofian Amrabat on loan on deadline day. Like I think the Agate deal is fine. Like whatever. Like first 3 games of the season, you haven't got whatever. The transfer windows are not for an impact at the start of the season. Transfer windows are for the long-term future of the club. It comes back to it comes back to what we were saying earlier with Bournemouth. It's like you don't win a transfer window and then win the first 5 games of the season. The teams that tend to do quite well at the start of the season are the ones that haven't done that much business at all. Look at Liverpool. We were just saying, they had such a settled squad. But I think with Ten Hag, it's more that after that FA Cup win, interviewing Pochettino, interviewing Tuchel, interviewing De Zerbi, I don't know. I think there were some really, really top managers out there in the summer, and I think that there's always going to be an argument that they could have gone for Pochettino or Tuchel. There's always going to be that argument for sure, as long as United are not performing as they should be. So. There is massive pressure on him in that sense. What I will say is that in those first 2 games, especially there were signs. There were some positive signs. Yeah. I think United were actually deserving winners against Fulham. I think they on another day they beat Brighton. The defensive structure is an issue. The defensive structure definitely is an issue. But I think United do at least. I think they will end up being a team that is able to build from the back a lot better than we've seen before.
Yeah. I actually thought in this Liverpool game, I thought De Ligt really wasn't too bad.
In the first half, he crumbled a bit in the second.
I thought Dalo had a decent game.
Mazraoui is positive.
Mazraoui, yeah. There were a few players where I was like, there ended up a few United players are actually playing decently well. Yet United were really bad at times, and so I was thinking maybe more so that kind of comes down.
So, but it's a little bit like what we were saying earlier with Everton. I think a big problem with United is just that it's just like as soon as things start going against
heads
you,
drop.
it's like heads drop, heads absolutely drop.
That picture of Jim Ratcliffe in the stands, he has to be be more composed.
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
you're not wrong.
No one's buying it that he wanted Ten Hag because he didn't. He didn't want him. He hasn't even really fully endorsed Ten Hag since the summer. I think as the owner of the club, you have to be more composed than to sit there with your head in your hands like that. I've never seen any other owner on that level, at that high level, doing that. It's just constant PR. And I feel so sorry for Ten Hag, man. And I think if he left United, he should stay and take whatever payout they give him if they are ever to fire him. I don't think the new contract makes any difference. If they want to fire him, they'll fire him. Like people keep going, they're giving him a new contract. I'm like, well. Yeah.
Also, I just don't think they do. I think things have to go pretty seriously wrong for it to happen. It's less about the contract because the contract is he's still kind of on probation. I would say he's almost on a second probation.
That's it.
But like this early on, having backed him to the tune of 200 million in the summer. Not that these are Ten Hag signings, but they have backed him with a lot of new players. I think, I think whatever happens, he probably lasts at least half the season.
Yeah,
that's if things go really, really badly. But I think I think people are slightly at panic stations. Like United conceded 3 goals from some really rookie errors in the midfield in that game, and with the fullbacks bombing forward. Like I think changes do need to be made, and I think the style of play maybe needs to calm down a little bit. And United need to slow down the play a bit more, especially when they're like breaking on teams, or at least when they're picking up the ball from the defence and you've got like 2 fullbacks bombing on and leaving like 2 centre-backs to clear up any potential mess that comes from that. But those things aside, which do seem quite big, I think we shouldn't panic too much. Like the Liverpool game was a bit of a mad one. Let's say.
It's like AC Milan hierarchy having to come out and defend Fonseca after 3 games. I'm like, give the guy a chance, man. Yeah. Same with Ten Hag. But I do think Mourinho's whole see where they play, how they play, if they play thing, it's so applicable to United. Like Martial is currently being linked with AEK Athens. That's like the best move he's looking to get at the moment. Anthony looks like he's going to join Mourinho at Fenerbahce. I think even
has that actually been?
Look, that's the links.
Yeah.
That's the links.
Yeah.
My point is, look, don't get me wrong. McTominay to Napoli is fine. Wan-Bissaka back to West Ham. My point is, he does have a point. There's a lot of rubbish in that. Not rubbish. There's been a lot of not at the level players in that squad. Some of those are Ten Hag signings.
Literally.
But they are cycling through. Even it's tricky, but I think they'll get there.
Soon we'll see Tadic join in January for United. Let's move on to Arsenal then, quickly. Just cover a few more teams before we end the video. Arsenal's season so far, they played Wolves, they beat them 2-0. They played Aston Villa, they beat them 2-0. Though Villa, I think, were slightly unlucky in that game, or their finishing let them down. Then they played Brighton and drew 1-1, and people started losing their heads. Declan Rice obviously getting sent off. That decision is a bit mad in itself. But the next few games, they've got Spurs in the North London derby away. They've got Atlanta in the Champions League. Man City after that. Yeah. Bolton in the Cup. Leicester. PSG, Southampton. So a few tricky games up on the way. They're missing, obviously, Declan Rice in that North London game.
It is a cup final now.
It is a cup final, indeed. How do you think about Arsenal so far this season? Yeah. I thought last year they started really well. And just flew off like a rocket. Whereas this year, things have been a little bit more shaky. I know the Wolves game, put that aside, because Wolves obviously are struggling a lot this season. But Villa, if Ollie Watkins takes his 2 chances, Arsenal might struggle to score 2 goals. They would have gone 2-0 down at that point, and it could have been a very different result. The Brighton result, I know things obviously get changed massively after that red card, so it feels a little bit harsh to maybe form an opinion on Arsenal when
They were
they
still
were
as
when
good
they
as
were
Brighton
10
in
man.
that game.
But yeah, exactly. Yeah, very true. With one man less as well. But they are playing Spurs. They are playing Man City.
Were they
next.
though? I mean, they were absolutely that second half. They were absolutely, they were pinned back into their own box. Arsenal. I know, like with 10 men, but
They still created opportunities to win the game, and I think that's
few. Yeah, I mean, yeah,
as much as you can hope for with 10 men against a very good Brighton side.
Yeah, but I guess that's where the worry is, and maybe Brighton will go to the Etihad and cause Man City just as many problems. But my only worry is with Arsenal is that, like, if you're looking over at Man City right now as like an Arsenal player, you're already thinking, okay, like, can we actually afford to drop points at any point?
Yeah.
Like over the next few months. Like if City, I know City will inevitably there'll be a difficult period, but it feels like, I don't know. It feels like you just don't want to have that difficult period so earlier in the season. And like Arsenal will finish in the top 2 this year, no doubt, and will finish with at least 86 points probably. But like, I just think, already experiencing the kind of adversity they have in terms of the Brighton game, and not coming out of the blocks quite as quickly. I think there's always going to be a little bit of a thing of like, okay, we're going to be having to chase now.
And the thing is, the talks have already kind of started. I've seen a few things about like Kai Havertz up top being the striker again, even though I thought this finish against Brighton was pretty good. But I think they then say that, he obviously had that other chance. But look, I think sometimes we get into this mode where, like, especially when you're seeing Erling Haaland do what he does, where you do think, we were mentioning it earlier, where you do think like, he needs to be finishing every chance if we're going to be on our way to Man City, to beat Man City. But sometimes it just isn't physically possible. Like, unless you have Erling Haaland, we were saying earlier, maybe the next best kind of finisher is a Victor Osimhen, which obviously didn't happen in the end. It's super, super, super tough. And I think, obviously, playing against Spurs next without Declan Rice in that midfield. They haven't got Moreno, obviously, who's out with an injury. They're going to have to kind of have a little bit of a patch job in there. I'm sure Jorginho will come in and figure things out. But they did bring Raheem Sterling in as well. On loan.
That's a big one. Like I think like Raheem Sterling could really, I think the Raheem Sterling signing feels a little bit like the Trossard signing in January 2023.
Yeah.
I just feel like the kind of the mean level of quality in that Arsenal forward line has just, it's another kind of marginal gain that Arsenal have made there with Sterling. Like I absolutely, that's one of my favourite signings of the summer, Sterling. So I think he could have an impact as well. But it's just I think like Arteta's just got a bit of a job on his hands. He hasn't really had to deal without Declan Rice yet since signing him. He played almost every game. I think he might have played every game last year.
Maybe all but what? I think only Saliba was the one to play every minute or something.
Rice played as much football almost as anyone in the world last year. I think if you look at the minutes and games he played, I was looking at this on Transfermarkt. He is up there. He
made to the final of the Euros. Yeah, he made it to the quarters of the Champions League. Was it semis in it? Quarters?
He played every minute. He played every game in the Premier League. Yeah, in terms of actual times he was on the pitch, it was crazy.
Wow. Well, we'll see what happens with Arsenal. I just want to cover 2 more teams before we end, being Spurs and Brighton. Let's do it with Spurs first, because the discourse in the Spurs community it blows my mind. I was seeing this recently. We've had Ben Bowman on the channel. We've had Stanley as well, and speaking with them and talking about them, and like even just you follow them on social media, so you see like kind of the Spurs takes come in. It's so up and down. Like, I thought Spurs had a pretty good window. Some Spurs fans are absolutely rattled by saying, like, how are we bringing in just like 19-year-olds, 18-year-olds?
Well, there's a point to that, yeah. I mean,
for sure. But like I thought Spurs have now had 2 windows in a row where they've done a good job at trying to build a squad for the long-term future and to play this Ange style of football. I guess anyway, the bigger complaints more so were about obviously losing to Newcastle after dominating a game again and the high line issue at Spurs. They obviously drew to Leicester as well, not necessarily having the
battered Leicester.
Minerals, having battering them and then drawing 1-1. But they weren't so good in the second half, and then obviously smashing Everton. What do we make of Spurs so far then? Because that high line is the one that people keep speaking about.
I think, look, Postecoglou can't always be blamed for his forwards not scoring enough chances. Like Solanke should be scoring against Leicester. They should have been out of sight in that game.
They should have scored more against Newcastle.
Well, again, so like he can't kick the ball in the net for them. However, you have to be able to defend. Like even against Leicester, Vardy should have scored a second goal against them.
Yeah.
Newcastle, don't get me wrong, good attack, but they had the worst window of the window. Is that right? Worst window. They had the worst summer in the window.
They had the worst window of the summer.
Their window looks beaten up. Chip paint. It's not. It doesn't look
single
nice.
glaze.
Single glaze. Yeah, they had a single glaze crap window. Shattered. Anyway, I've got to shut up. But no, the point is they have to be able to defend properly. Like they sold Højbjerg in the summer. I'm not saying he was like instrumental to that team, but he's a big voice in that midfield, probably a big voice in the dressing room. They changed a lot of personnel. They have to be more solid than what they are.
This was the same. Like they live and die by the sword, right?
Like it's dumb. That's so dumb.
They literally. I always think of that Chelsea game, which Chelsea
it's never going anywhere, though, is it?
For something.
But like if you look at Pep, he's always changing his defense. He's always thinking of new ideas. 4 centre backs, whatever. He's always thinking of ways. How can I make this defense as solid as possible? I know they've got like cheat codes and Rodri, whatever, but Postecoglou has to figure out.
But their cheat code is Van de Ven, right? And he was injured against Newcastle.
But equally, you look at like Pep in his first like year at City, and he stuck to his guns despite massive pressure from the media. Like I do think there's a little bit we do get into a bit of a danger of like it's a bit like when some pundits talk about like zonal, I feel like they don't actually want. But there was a period where pundits always talked about zonal marking, and it was like every time like a quarter like a ball goes in, a goal gets conceded from a corner. It was like, oh well, it's because they're zonal marking. It was like, well maybe they just. It's not actually the zonal marking. Maybe they're just not doing it very well. And I feel like against Newcastle, it was like. They didn't. I don't think they conceded the goal because of the high line. They conceded the goal because there was no communication between Jagic and Romero, and Romero stepped out. It was like they just like you can do that. You just have to do it better. Like look at Aston Villa last year. Like they played a high line all year and were amazing at it. And like I think Spurs have the capability to do it. They just need to be better. They just need to be better.
Dukes was not happy with Romero on Twitter.
Like Romero, it is on Romero. That it's like 100% on Romero. But like that's the thing. Again, like you can't like in the same way that Ange can't put the ball in the back of the net for Spurs. Ange also maybe he can coach them better. But like also like Romero's been there, like been working on Durant for a year. Like he's also like a massive voice in that Spurs team. Like. He needs to take responsibility there. Like he was at fault.
Do you not think that's maybe a slight confusion with what is being required for them in defence? Because he is the leader in that back line, Romero. If he's made the decision to step up, then surely it's on the other defenders.
But this is what Ange did say about that. Like Dragson, for instance, he's not played a lot of minutes. Like, he's not played a lot.
I think it was his fifth start in the Premier League.
But then that also like this system does take time to understand and learn, and that partially is part of a reason why. I mean, you mentioned cheat codes. Like their cheat code for that high line is Van de Ven. Like Van de Ven's pace and like understanding of how they want to play football, and just his footballing ability is in general, but the pace in particular allows them to say that break happens. His pace and get him back there in time to kind of cover it. And obviously, in Newcastle, they didn't have him then. But I just kind of thought like the absolute head loss of some of the Spurs fans was crazy to me. And I think sometimes there's obviously this thing about like they are so. I think their thing was okay, but when like this, the whole point about the transfer window thing was when is it going to lead to something? When is it going to mean we win the?
I agree. Like, I like all their young signings, but again, you can't just constantly be building towards something. And it can't constantly be like, oh well, give it 3 years, give it 4 years.
But I don't necessarily think that their signings were that bad. As if like they are. Yes, they're young, but they are guys that can play now.
No, I agree with you.
As well.
I agree with you, but I can understand. Some people want a few more finished articles that you can slot in, and the only one they bought in
was Dominic Solanke.
Don't get me wrong, that's good, but they sold a lot of players as well. The squad's a bit thinner than it was last season.
Midfield's a bit thin, but then Archie Gray's there, like he can play centre back and also midfield. I mean, there's a few things where like I do generally like. Whereas last year against Fulham, they played that B side when Fulham beat them in the Carabao or FA Cup, and
beat them in the league, mate. 4-0.
Yeah, he did. I do think this year Ange does need to focus on one of those cups and go, okay, let's just go all guns blazing and try and see if we can get something. They're in the Europa League as well. They're definitely one of the favourites for that as well. But I do think maybe the discourse in the Spurs community is a little bit.
They want to win anything.
Crazy.
They'd win the Carabao. They'd honestly.
They should. They should, mate. Like they've had very good squads to have not won anything. Put it that way. Okay, our final team we'll cover as well. Then being Brighton. Feels like they're going to be competing for Europe this year, lads, doesn't it? Like 31 years old. Obviously, the new boy in the coaching dugout.
I was having a look. He's actually coached for ages.
Yeah.
He's been coaching since he's 23.
But it is still a mad thing. Like 31 as a coach is all. I understand why people can find it crazy, but I'm sure we'll talk about his age a lot less, especially if they continue to perform as they do, because they are an exciting team who continue to make so many chances in their games, have a depth going forward that is absolutely frightening, and just continue to get better and better. Like we mentioned earlier about teams that obviously who don't have maybe a busy transfer window, and actually they can be really impressive from the start of the season. Brighton had a busy transfer window, and they have a lot of new players in there and are doing a lot of impressive things.
What I like about it is we all focus on their attacking options going forward, quite rightly. What is less focused on is actually the experienced heads in that team and the leaders in that team. That starts at the back with a centre-back pairing, which hasn't really changed from last year.
Yeah.
I know Dunk was pretty crap last year, but he is still some of
the goal for Arsenal, the goal against Arsenal, that ball from him is ridiculous.
Yeah. Like, I think there's a good player in there when you get a tune,
Yeah.
when he's feeling confident. João Pedro, who is unreal, he was the captain of Watford by the time that he left the club. He's had a year to get used to Brighton. Now he looks like he's been playing the Premier League for a long, long time. He's a really good player. They were so upset in Brazil when he left. I think it was Fluminense.
Yeah.
To come over, like way more than other players in that time. And also Milner's back playing really solid football. Matoma looks like a leader in that side.
Well, he's also not injured now, doesn't it? With Matoma, it looks like he's fully back.
My point is, yes, Minter, great. All these other guys, Adingra,
But even they were there last year. And Abaleba.
I know.
Not Minter, but Adingra was
Adingra was there last year. But these are all players that they've got such a nice mixture.
Yeah.
And then they've got a manager who clearly has commanded the respect straight away. Like James Milner said, there was within minutes. No doubt who's the boss. Welbeck as well. Lest we forget. Danny Welbeck playing some of the... Just at least a good player. He's a good player.
100%.
And so I think just the balance in that squad is excellent. They do have options running through that side. My worry is in the absence of European football, is people going to get disgruntled and frustrated at any point? Like, because Gruder, he's another like really attacking, interesting player. The Ruta that they bought in from Leeds. That's a lot of options.
It's a lot of options.
To keep all of them happy is going to be interesting, especially as you said with no European football. Yeah.
So that's maybe that. But if they look, the way you negate that is if you're pushing for Champions League football, if you're competing at the very top end of the table, then everyone falls into line.
Yeah, very true.
So let's fingers crossed. I'd love to see someone interesting have a really big season in the Prem, I wouldn't mind it being Brighton.
Yeah, I think what is it, 2 years ago that Brighton were, in the top six or pushing for top six, and I think even last summer we were talking about Brighton as an outside shout for the top four, and it didn't quite happen last year with all the injuries that De Zerbi had. I think the transfer window that they had that summer as well wasn't amazing in terms of their midfield signings, replacing Caicedo, replacing McAllister. But this summer, like Pascal Gross, who was the heartbeat of that side for so many years, left, and there were understandably some concerns about that. But we look at who they've had in the midfield so far. James Milner's been in there every single game, and then they've had Vifa, Baleba, and Gilmore, who's now left, start, and they haven't been unsettled by that at all. I think Vifa's an amazing signing. Baleba was brought in, I think, in the same, either just before Caicedo left for Chelsea or just after
from Lille,
and was seen as a potential replacement. Young player last year was probably just a bit too early for him, but he's looked really, really good so far too. So it feels like a bit of a perfect storm in that sense that Herzl has inherited. I think they'll be really exciting. Like
they are playing nice football though as well. Like his tactics and the way he wants them playing football has been really, really fun to watch. It's so direct as well. Like he obviously when you've got the likes of Matoma and Minter as well who can do this and just run at players.
I'm excited to see Cadiolo as well.
Yeah, another one. I mean, Evan Ferguson's still there. Whether he gets a look in will be interesting.
Yeah.
Selling Gilmore after O'Reilly got injured isn't interesting. I think they're slightly light.
I think it must have come from the player side as well. That I feel like
him and Scotty McTominay.
Him and Scotty, they're so good.
Eating pizza on Vesuvius.
Sunburn Central. Yeah, bloody hell, Scott McTominay. I do want to say, surely he's got sunburn already.
I was looking at the Napoli midfield. They've still got Anguissa and Lobotka. McTominay and Gilmore just walk into that side? I don't know.
McTominay is the Zelensky replacement, baby.
Which European? Did they make a European competition this year?
No,
they didn't make any.
10th,
Wow,
they were.
That'd be interesting. I mean, Antonio Conte, that would be interesting for sure. But yes, that is Brighton, who do feel like they are going to be competing for Europe in some way, shape, or form. Boys, that is the end of the video. Sorry we didn't get to go through every single team, but we do like to chat.
We made a decent effort.
Exactly. We definitely made a decent effort for sure. Henry Hill, thank you so much for joining me.
I was just seeing if they were in the Conference League. I wondered if maybe they'd snuck in.
Maybe, yeah.
Because you never know.
Or maybe just like a cup. They didn't win the cup, did they?
No,
So,
they didn't.
Henry Hill, thank you for joining me, my friend. Where can the people at home see you, and also most recently see me and you?
Yeah, no, look, I've plugged it already. Over on Football Joe, please do come show some love. Zach was on this week. We're trying to build something. It's exciting actually to take a channel with so few subscribers and really see if I can apply this stuff that we've learned. Because I almost took it for granted just working for Football Daily. I joined Football Daily when we had 2 million subscribers on my main channel.
Nearly,
and it was sort of, don't get me wrong, it was nice to feel like I was part of it and contributing. But this is really sort of me seeing all the things that I've learned, seeing if I can apply that and make greatness.
Build an empire.
Build an empire. So, brick by brick. Brick by brick. We'll see. So, yes, come check that out. Zach was brilliant this week. And, hopefully you have a laugh along the way.
Thank you very much. Michael McCubbin, if a lot of people at home want to see you more often, where can they do that?
I imagine a lot of people will have already cottoned on, but like myself and Doogie and Joe, most weeks as well, now present a show called The Lowdown on Sky Sports Premier League. Effectively just, Sunday vibes, but a bit earlier in the week. So go and check us out there if you haven't already.
Brilliant, boys. Thank you so much for joining me. This one has been an absolute pleasure. If you guys at home have enjoyed it, then please like the video. Leave a comment as well. Let us know your thoughts and opinions. And make sure you're subscribed to the channel. You do not want to miss any of the great content that's coming out over the next year. Thank you guys so much. See you guys very, very soon. Bye.